someone said this is not what I made up, but it's just stuck with me, like that I have a desire to do whatever God calls me to more than even like, I don't want a choice in it. Like, I want to be so tied to who God has called me to be that it doesn't even matter what my opinion is in it anymore, because I just want it to be what he has for me.
Say it again. Say it loud. That is
right.
Yeah.
It's just tie my opinions, my emotions, my choices, just tie them to you and just lead me to where it is that you want me to be, regardless of the hardships that come with it.
What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here with another episode of Watch God Work. And today I have the honor to have my sister, our sister, your sister, Miss Whitney Wood. What's going on, Whitney?
Hey, what's up? Thanks for having me.
What's happening? You know, we were talking a little bit about LA, greater LA, and Pasadena.
Greater,
we didn't get into
yeah.
we didn't get into any football conversation, so we're coming here in peace, in harmony.
You didn't.
But you know, one of the big jokes that I have with like a number of friends is, you know, we kind of talk about like Avenger superpowers. And like some of the, you know, everybody has an Avenger superpower. And like, I feel like God gives like people just enough of what they need. So they're not like obnoxious. And we're like, one of those things we're just like, Lord, I just wish you gave me the ability to sing. Like, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I would have been obnoxious in these streets. But I would have been singing everywhere. But I think there's something to be said about one who has a voice that I think would stop people in their tracks. But ultimately one who had been stopped in their tracks and is given voice to words that have, I think, changed and transformed lives. And I think that's part of your story, among so many other stories. And to be so accomplished and to be producing, I think, sounds, words, harmonies, I think that we need in this time, you know. Yeah. From Author, Away in a Manger, all these are just tracks that just make you sit. You're like, man.
Aw, thank you.
So I say that to say the work that you've done faithfully over time, I think I cannot capture in a minute clip. But I will say that I think people are hearing you, and I think more than anything, your story comes through in every lyric that you share or write. So I'm going to get out the way. Who is Miss Whitney Wood?
Who is Miss Whitney Wood? It's such a question.
Yes.
That is such a question, man. Yeah. So, I mean, again, thank you so much for having me. I think even right now, I'm like in this new space of like sharing my story with people, and it's so like fresh and new. And I think even sometimes it's like I'll put this pressure because I'm like, okay, I got to make sure I'm like, I say these, I don't know, crazy impactful things. And God's like, can you just talk about like what I'm doing in your life? And so if I stumble over my words, it's just because it's still kind of fresh. But Whitney Wood, I am born and raised in LA. I'm a pastor's kid.
PK team PK.
PK, yes. I grew up an athlete, such a huge tomboy. I loved every sport I could play. I played, basketball, soccer. I did synchronized swimming. I did rugby. I did fencing. Like I just did whatever, I could get into. And so sports was my life. And then I became a swimmer, water polo player. And that's just what a lot of, my life became. I was injured. And so the whole dream of being like, my dream was to like be on the Olympic water polo team. That was a dream I really wanted, and tore both my rotator cuffs. And I was just kind of like, okay, well, now what? And so, went to college, and I kind of just like happened upon music, like friends that I had made in college, they sang, and my mom has a beautiful voice. And my dad does too, like crazy beautiful. And we've always made fun of him because you can hear him in the back of his church, like singing all these crazy harmonies and just like louder than everybody.
Oh, he's flexing. He was flexing back there. It was
he was flexing.
For the Lord.
Yeah, absolutely. He's not a quiet man. And so, college happened and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing with my life, but I'm just going to start singing. And so I kind of did chapel team and I went to a Christian school, but it really was just because that was like the only place I could get in. I was not good with my studies. I did not have a good GPA, ditched class all the time in high school and stuff. And so, I got into music and then I graduated and I was like, I actually think this is what I want to do with my life. Like I enjoy singing. I love doing it with the friends I'm doing. And we all just got into the gig mode, in Hollywood. I sang everywhere I could, the sketchiest of sketchy.
Like paint the picture, Whitney.
Oh my gosh. Like when Craigslist was the thing, like you could get gigs through Craigslist. So, driving, at midnight to like this one spot that was open on a whole street where nothing else was open. And they're like, okay, that is sick, but that's the hustle, to like going to like comedy shows. And like, I was the one musical act. But it was like a very different crowd that I would, so but whatever, like that was the hustle. It's like, just, you gotta sing, you gotta get your name out there and all that kind of stuff. And then I remember getting a call for my first gig ever, doing music. I ended up singing at the Grammys with Nicki Minaj. And I got a call and I was standing in Forever 21 and they called and they're like, hey, we need some background singers. And I was like, I answered all, yeah, for sure, I'm available. And then I was screaming at the mall, in Forever 21. And so from there, so I love music. I'm so passionate about music. I'm really passionate about sports as well. Yeah. And so, is that a good introduction?
No, this so much, I've heard stories, I think our family that listens to this understands partly some of my humor that I share, but, I think I heard a story about like a woman on a plane giving birth and she didn't know she was pregnant. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, I'm like, like without going into detail, I'm like, aren't there some indicators, like that would tell you, right? Similarly, it's how I feel when I hear people who are just like later in life, they're like, I just started to sing, and I just picked this up. I'm like, this entire time you were sitting on this, like this voice, like, did you not talk? And, so there's a part of it, there's something that, but it's not to say, I'm pretty sure that you were singing, off and on, like throughout the time that you were engrossed in sports, but there's singing and then there's like singing. Right. And have something so powerful, I think it's a testimony to your passion for sport, because you're like, hey, I'm committed to this. But then ultimately, like the transition of like, oh, this is the next thing. And I actually think that this is something that I could actually make a living in. I think one of the words you describe, but also I've seen it in other contexts to describe just the passion. Right. Was it like a kind of a volleyball thing of just saying like, I just always had that fire? And then two, like, did you really not realize until college that you had a voice that was like, yeah, this could probably take me places, like just, could you please just illustrate that for us, please? So, obviously music has been in my family. But even growing up, my mom always wanted me to do choir and like in high school and stuff. And I was like, no, that's for losers. Like I didn't, they made me sing in some church plays and stuff, but that was really it. Like I had no desire to sing. I really didn't. I was an athlete. That's what I was. That was my whole identity, And so, I think the passion for it developed when I realized okay, I'm good at this. Like I sing and people are responding in a positive way. But I learned to love it. My junior year of college, I went on, they call it like a celebration tour. And so it was,
we got in a 12-passenger van and just drove around the country singing at churches and camps and like whoever would take us. And it was that trip when I was like, oh, like, I think this is what I want to do with my life. It was a horrible trip. Like, you know, we went to some small churches who thought that drums were evil. Like we got asked to leave things because we were told like, this is not worship. This is glorifying yourselves, you know, just lots of weird things. But I was like, oh my gosh, like I love who I'm doing this with, but I love what I'm doing. Like it brought me back to some of the, like the fire that I would get when I would play sports. It was like, oh, like I'm not even like, I wonder if I'm good enough for this. It was just like, oh yeah, like this is what I want to, this is me. Like, this is it. This is what I want to do.
I'm imagining the story, like I'm in this, in the caravan of 12 people and going around and like, you know, getting the banana peels a bit, you know, proverbially but then but then there's also a part of me that wonders, you know, was that what I would call like supernatural experience, right? I think when I've, you know, described it, I think many athletes, you'll actually hear this conversation around like almost like the furnace went out, right?
Yeah.
You know, when, you know, injury and you're kind of like, who am I? What's going on? I had this plan. You know, I definitely can relate to that piece. But then when the fire comes back on, was that for you a God moment or encounter with God moment? Or was there even like, I think, follow-on moments where kind of God was affirming just like, hey, keep going with this, right? Was it that call, right, around Nicki Minaj? Where did you feel like, okay, almost scarily, this is supernatural, like I got to roll with this?
I think it was the call for the Grammys because I've never had like and when I say like a hustle spirit, like I've never had the desire to be around people that I just don't genuinely want to be around. Like I get the whole like, you gotta get in rooms and you gotta grease the right people and all that kind of stuff. And I hosted something in college. It was like this, kind of like an American Idol at school. And so I was hosting it with a friend, cause they just liked our personalities and we were just goofy and whatever. And so and the judges that we had were some pretty very well-known people. And, you know, we had to kind of vamp for a minute while they were figuring out who won. And so we just turned on I don't even know what song it was. And we just kind of like started going and just, you know, we physically ran around the room and we vocally just kind of were running and just being ridiculous. And one of the judges, this guy, Stevie Mackey, who now is the
voice coach.
Stevie, I mean, he's who got me I got my first gig because of him, but he walked up and he's like, I see what you did. And I was like, huh? And then he invited me over to his house and we just kind of started doing voice lessons and just hanging. And it was like, oh, like I don't have to, I think the God moment was like, I don't feel like I have to force my way into this.
Ooh.
Not in the fact of like, you know, I had to do my dues and all that kind of stuff. Not any of that, but I was just like, I wasn't trying to get attention and that wasn't my heart. And I think God just he keeps just putting me in rooms and I'm like, what, why am I here? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, I wasn't trying to get here, you know? So, yeah. So I think like that moment definitely was like, oh, like, cause I'm singing with people who this is what they do. And like to say like my first really paid gig was the Grammys. It's kind of ridiculous.
It's like those only God things, because in many senses, like you said, like obviously you were putting in work, right? You know, it's hard for somebody to say, you know, the hustle spirit. I was like, you were out there, you were doing the circuit, like you were out there getting your name out, you know, you were doing reps, right? You were getting your reps in. But you could imagine that, right? Like, I'm not pressing, you know, what I hear you saying, like, I'm not really pressing to do this. I think even as I put forward, I think one of the, I'm imagining what the acceleration was after that, right? You know, what it looked like after that. You know, what was your dynamic of working and starting getting your name out after that experience at the Grammys?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a huge part of my story. Like, the trajectory really did start to go up from there, because I think, you know, I was working hard. I was working on my own music. But I genuinely loved connecting with people. And so I think God has given me a really good gift of like, I started just meeting with the people who were doing what I wanted to do with a genuine like desire to be like, who are you and how do you do this? You know? And so I started for bigger gigs, and I got to go on tour with some artists and, you know, travel the world. And like, it really started to kind of go up from there, which was amazing. And then on a tour that I did with Demi Lovato, at the end of that tour, like during that whole tour, I wasn't feeling very good, like physically. And I got home from it and I was like, okay, I think I just need some rest. Like I'm just not feeling vocally, physically, just everything was not feeling good, but I had to push, you know, I mean, you got to do to get the job done. And then from there on, I kind of I got diagnosed with some different chronic illness, and some stuff like that. And so it was interesting because like at the height of like, oh, like I'm doing what I wanted to do. Like I'm in these rooms with people. My whole world kind of came crashing down, you know, in bed for 5-6 days a week. And, you know, that's its own super just long story. And I still struggle with it. But yeah, so it was like, I hit, you know, a really, really good trajectory. And I thought from there, I was like, okay, here we go. And then, you know, I ended up in bed for the next 4 or 5 years. So, yeah.
This is, I want to hold this piece. Like, so like if everyone's kind of like you pause the movie and you're in bed at this time, I want to kind of connect this to just kind of your journey with God, right, over time, because, you know, typically there is a I think a view for many people that particularly if you grew up in a house of faith for you know, in every sense of the word, and then have a layer of kind of just being under, you know, your parents being, you know, ministers in many ways, though we're all called ministers, but that's all the conversation, right? You know, someone could say there's like level one, which is, this is my world, so I didn't really have a choice in this. And, you know, perhaps I encountered God, you know, for myself in the midst of this environment. But until I kind of was removed from that, there was like another level of, okay, now this becomes good news to me. And now I really understand that. Was this kind of the moment where the faith hit the road, or was there other moments before that where you felt like there was just a step function that happened in your relationship with God outside of obviously how you came up?
Yeah, I definitely had a lot of years of like, I'm an atheist. Like, and I just said it, like, you know, and my parents were beautiful with all of it. They really just let me to figure out my journey and stuff, because it was needed. But I would say like high school, I feel like I had a couple conversion moments, you know. High school, I have a really big heart for the homeless, and I just really, really, my heart is so drawn to that. And so like in high school, I worked in different, I interned for a ministry that did a lot of inner city work and a lot of work with the homeless. And, you know, I'm praying over somebody and I see a crippled hand just like open, like immediately after we're praying over this individual, you know. And then from there I was like, okay, you know, that was, I think, my first, like, you know, stake in the ground. Life happened and I was like, I love God, but you know, he's in my life, but he's not my life. And then college, it kind of happened again, I think near the end of college. But same, you know, I'm in college. I love God, but I also loved, you know, doing things that God didn't want me doing. You know, and then when I got sick, I think that's when my Jacob wrestle started, honestly. So I would say it probably was like the genesis of it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I was in a long-term relationship, going to get married, knew it wasn't probably going to be the thing. God woke me up one night, audible voice of God that said, "You're done." And so I moved, and that I think in everything, honestly, was like okay, I'm going to end a relationship with the love of my life for you. I might as well this time, like I might as well, my life is going to completely be in service of you now, because why would I do this if I'm not going to fully live out my life? So it was like the health stuff, I think, was the precipice of a lot of it. Some choices to be obedient was then like, okay, yeah, this is all for you, God. Like I'm realizing it. So it was a combo of like those two things.
This is, like, I love how you kind of took us on a journey there. I'm just imagining, for people not even understanding, I think the gravity of what you were going through and have been navigating through. Like, I just imagine, if you imagine ourselves, in your room and you're looking up at your ceiling and you're under, your covers, and you don't even want to look at your social media and the people and that you're working with, and you're overwhelmed. What in those Jacob moments, per se, for those who are listening and understand, there was a moment that Jacob really kind of became real, a people beyond just a person in that moment, in the dark. In the dark for you, what were you saying to God? Like, what was the conversation? Was it kind of like, so why would you even do this? Why would you even allow me to? What were some of the conversations you were having with God, and what allowed you, beyond your health improving to an extent that you could at least move and be a little more mobile, what helped you get out of that a bit, in a healthy way?
Yeah, I mean, I was cussing him out. Like, I was honestly, like, I was so devastated. I was like, did I do something wrong? Is this punishment for, sins and just doing things that you told me not to do? Do I not have enough faith? Like, of course I went through like, is God even real? Like, is this even a thing? I questioned everything. I blamed God. I blamed myself. I had no clue why this was happening, especially when I felt like there was such a big call on my life, even just from a young age. And so I was like, okay, so this was all a lie. Like, this is okay. So life is meant to just kind of be endured and torture and hell, and then we die, and cool. I got severely depressed. I would have never gone through with it, but I woke up every morning just like, can I just die already? Like, it got very dark. And I think, some of the times, and I think God is so beautiful because he let me do that. Like, he didn't try and correct me, and prove to me why I was wrong yet. Like, I think he just was so gracious and was kind of like, okay, get it out. Like, you got to get it out. You got to say it. So get it out, and then I think I got to such a place of like emptiness and brokenness. And even just like, who am I? Why am I here? What is the purpose of this? Why did you create me if I'm just like a waste of space? Like, I felt like to my family, I felt, I shut myself off from just really anybody in my life. And so, I think one of the most greatest encounters I had with God was when I God, what do you think about all of this? Like, why is this happening? And I remember him saying, well, you wouldn't listen if I told you, so I'm gonna just let you keep talking. And I was like, oh, God gets a little, he goes hard on me sometimes. Like, the soft, still voice is very much there too, but the tough love daddy kicks in sometimes. And so I just started to say, okay, like, I'm listening, like, who are you? Like, tell me. And I just began to like encounter the presence of God. And I wouldn't say that it was like this, my theology got really good and I started to worship and pray nonstop and all this stuff. But I was just like, God, like, tell me who you are. Because if I don't care if there's nothing to you, because whatever this life is really sucks. So tell me who you are. And he just started to like really slowly and beautifully just like make his way just into like these really, really broken and empty pieces of me, where I began to encounter him, like not what I had known of him, not what people had said about him, not what I'd read, you know, even in scripture, but just like who I encountered God to be. And he really, really softened my heart to then move into a place of like, oh, like your goodness is ridiculous. Like it's unending. And who you have called me to be is pretty incredible too. And so that's kind of that journey of like, okay, I'm going to start trusting you. I'm going to start leaning in. And then that kind of began to develop.
This is, you know, I would love even to kind of like even back up a bit, even in these moments when he said he started to, and not so much invade, because invade makes it seem coercive, but sometimes it has to be that way. But just actually just making his way kind of through the rooms of the house inside of you, and understanding and trying to find it. Like, what does that, you know, for particularly for somebody who is hearing this and is saying like, okay, I see this moment. Okay, I see Nicki Minaj. Okay, I see this opening. Okay, I see this thing. So they're kind of tracking with you and then they see this. But then this is where I think a lot of people sometimes either feel alienated or feel it seems like it's too otherworldly to understand, like, one, what does it sound like when God says something? Like what, like if you could describe that for somebody, like for you, what that actually was. And then God coming into these broken places, you know, like what did that mean tangibly? If you can almost like paint a picture, tell a story about one aspect of how your growth with that relationship helped you.
Yeah. I think some of the hearing aspects of God, sometimes I feel like most of the times it's my own voice in my head, saying something that I wouldn't necessarily could have thought of by myself.
That's one of the best. This is one of the best explanations I have heard of all. No, seriously, of all time. Wow. It's the most concise, but like eye-opening. Keep going. I just had to get that moment.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm so glad. I think when I have a thought about myself that I just never could have had on my own, I'm like, okay, that's God. Or for some of those who might, you know, be a little bit more well-versed in scripture, like if anything that I say that is in my head, that agrees with the word of God, that's good, that's biblical, that's scripture, you know? And so I think I became so empty in a necessary way, but a really, really, really hard way, that I just had so much space to hear what it is that God started to say to me. I think I gave attention to it. Like God is always speaking to us. He is never not speaking to us, but it takes our focus and our attention to actually, you know, gauge. It's like when you're in a room and tons of people are talking, and, you know, the one person you want to talk to is far away. So it's like, oh wait, can you come closer? I can't hear you. You know, like it's doing that with God. Like you said, he's a gentleman. He moves in different ways, but it's like sometimes we just have to like stop and say, Lord, speak to me. And then he gives us the ears to hear his voice. And so, yeah, I think he just started to speak things over me. Like you are so good, like to me, like I started just hearing his voice. Like I love you. I have not forgotten about you. You are so worthy, just all of these things. And it was all counterfeit to what I had been thinking about myself. Right. Like in regards to getting sick, like my value and my identity, my entire life has been about what I was good at. So when I was an athlete, that's what my identity was. When I became a singer, that's what my identity was. And so when my identity was taken away as Whitney the singer, then I realized I wasn't rooted in anything at all. And so he just began to even just speak over me like, you are my daughter. Like, you are a child of God. You are chosen. You know, you weren't a mistake. And then he even just started saying things like, this is not the end. This is not your whole story. But also, like, this is just the beginning. This isn't permanent. You know, I do, and so many of us, we get so short-sighted, you know, and so it's like if we're having a bad moment or day or weeks or month, it's like, oh, this is my life, you know, and so you just begin to just put little seeds in my heart of like, no, this is nothing. Like, there's greatness for you, you know, for I know the plans that I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper. Like, and he just started to just whisper those things to me in my own voice. It was just me. It was my voice that I heard.